our Wellness Wednesdays. Can everyone hear me? I mean, I know you are all on mute, but I just want to check and see if everyone can hear me. If you can just wave, if you can hear me. Okay, good. Thank you, Bruce. That helps. We're going to go ahead and get started here. I would like to very proudly introduce to you Dr. Scott Walker, who is coming to us from Broward Health Imperial Point. Dr. Walker is a psychiatrist, and he is very aptly prepared to talk to us today then about coping with COVID-19. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Walker. And as soon as Dr. Walker does say a quick hello, I am going to come back on and help you all so that we're looking at the presentation that Dr. Walker is providing for us. The little thumbnails of all the other participants are either across your screen or on the right of your screen so that they don't cover up the PowerPoint presentation that Dr. Walker is going to share. So we're going to get started here shortly. Let me just get going here. And
thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Walker.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to be talking to you all today. Specifically, I'm going to talk a bit about loneliness and COVID-19, because I think it's such an apt topic right now with sort of the ongoing social distancing recommendations. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides so we can get started. And I know that Jackie's going to kind of walk you all through how to get Zoom to be looking as best as it can in order to see the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Jackie, if you want to walk them through it.
Okay, I think we just have to wait for your presentation, your screen share to be up.
Let me do that.
Okay, perfect. Now, if everyone wants to put the mouse at the very top of the screen, just above Dr. Walker's presentation, should see a slide that says loneliness during the pandemic. And if you put your mouse all the way to the top of the screen, there's a green bar, if you will, that says you are viewing Dr. Scott Walker's screen. Immediately to the right of that, there's something that says view options. And if you click on that, the little drop down arrow next to it, there's an option almost at the end that says side-by-side mode. If you click on side-by-side mode, it will allow any of the thumbnail pictures of other residents to be off to the side, possibly up at the top, depending if you click it twice. The point is that none of those pictures of other residents, the little thumbnails, are covering Dr. Walker's slide. So that's what we are aiming for here. Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead and let Dr. Walker take it from here.
All right. Thank you so much, Jackie. So I'm really excited to be speaking with you today about the very important topic of loneliness, which for many people may be, a bit worse in recent months, given recommendations regarding social interactions and specifically limiting them. So to walk you through what I'm going to be talking about today, first, I'm going to go through the experience of loneliness, including what it is and what it isn't, because I think there's some misconceptions about what it is when I'm talking about loneliness. So I want to kind of give you guys a good definition. I'm then going to cover some of the health consequences of prolonged loneliness, really speaking to the importance of this topic. And then finally, we will be looking at what we can do to combat loneliness in the era of COVID-19. And specifically, we're going to be looking at how our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions are all involved in our experiences of loneliness, which make them ideal targets to make changes in order to feel more connected. So what exactly is loneliness, and how can we define it? Well, first and foremost, it's a subjective perception. It's a perception of a deficit in social connection. And being subjective, that means it may vary from, it may be different from person to person. We can also call it an experience that has both emotional and cognitive dimensions. And again, being a unique experience means that people are going to experience it differently. Generally, it's associated with thoughts and feelings that are distressing or painful, and these can often lead to maladaptive behaviors such as isolating, um, or staying in bed, or any number of behaviors that aren't necessarily good for our health. I think it's also important just to reflect on what loneliness is not. So, you know, it's not the same as social isolation, which describes the phenomenon of being physically apart from people. So one can still experience loneliness in a big crowd, particularly if they're not feeling connected to the crowd. So you can imagine yourself walking down a busy street in Manhattan or Los Angeles, or any place with a lot of people. And if you're there by yourself, you can still feel quite lonely, even though you're surrounded by other people. Similarly, it's not the same as solitude. And solitude generally refers to being alone in a particular location. And solitude can be something that we seek from time to time, possibly to reflect, create, to write. For people who have a tendency towards introversion, it might be a way to recharge. So we think of solitude more as an escape from an otherwise busy and demanding society. And like I said, it can often be described as refreshing or invigorating. So we can be by ourselves and not feel lonely. And we can also be surrounded by people and yet experience loneliness. And again, it's because it really is about an individual's personal experience. Remember that subjective perception of not feeling connected enough with friends, family, or loved ones. So we have a working definition of loneliness. I want to just clarify what type of loneliness I'm going to be speaking about today. There's this concept called known as essential loneliness, which is usually more of a personality trait that can develop from not the best experiences early on in childhood. Maybe when somebody has a caregiver who is detached, or if somebody loses a parent early on. This really won't be the kind of loneliness that I will address today. It's a much more complicated sort of topic. What I will be talking to you about today is what is known as reactive loneliness. And reactive loneliness is the occasional feeling we will all experience at certain points across the lifespan. And particularly, we might feel these in times of loss, such as the death of a loved one, or a significant disruption in our lives, moving to a new place, for example. And this is really the type of loneliness that we will be focusing on. With COVID-19 and the social distancing recommendations, these have likely resulted in less frequent in-person visits, maybe less frequent physical contact with loved ones, family, etc. And so this is the type of loneliness that can result from these sorts of changes in our lives. So that's really what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And then I also want to talk to you about why loneliness is a concern and why it's something we should be worried about. Of course, quality of life and subjective distress are the most obvious answers. And we don't want people to be feeling distress, and we don't want people's quality of life to be affected. But we also know that people may develop feelings of anxiety and sadness when they experience prolonged loneliness, which isn't good for our mental health, of course. We also know that it can interfere with sleep, which can potentially cause daytime fatigue. And daytime fatigue is known to reinforce unhealthy behaviors such as isolating. It can exacerbate pain in people who struggle with any number of chronic pain issues. People with arthritis or an autoimmune disease can experience pain in heightened proportions when they're feeling lonely. And there's really this mind-body connection that we are only just beginning to understand. But research suggests that people who experience prolonged loneliness are at a risk of overall premature death. And the numbers are actually pretty concerning. It's similar to a person who has obesity, a person who has minimal physical activity, or even mild tobacco use. And again, this is prolonged loneliness, can have that effect on our life, And so we've observed that loneliness can cause inflammation in the body. Inflammation is our body's response to stress. in much the same way that our body combats an illness. When it's combating, say, the common cold, inflammation can communicate to the body that we're experiencing a threat. And it can be advantageous because it'll help get rid of the pathogen that causes the common cold. But over a prolonged period, it can actually be harmful on the body and lead to feeling fatigued or depressed. And this just kind of sets up a cycle where it becomes more difficult to pull ourselves out of these feelings of loneliness. We also know that it has a measurable effect on blood pressure, which can affect our whole cardiovascular system. And we also know that people who experience prolonged loneliness are at higher risk of having cognitive decline, memory issues, for example. And it can also precipitate or exacerbate substance use, which can have further negative effects on our physical and mental well-being. So, really the purpose of this slide is just to point out the multitude of reasons that exist on why it's important to address this topic of loneliness beyond just the distress or emotional pain we may experience as a result. So what can we do? What are some options to reduce loneliness and improve our sense of feeling connected? Well, it turns out there are really 3 prongs to both the experience of loneliness as well as targets to combat loneliness. This graphic here illustrates these 3 prongs and also demonstrates that they are all interconnected. So, our thoughts are very much connected to our emotions, which are very much connected to our behaviors. The solid boxes, being thoughts, feelings, and actions, represent the ways in which loneliness can affect us in negative ways. And in contrast, these dotted boxes represent ways to mitigate or help us in times of loneliness. And we can do so by changing our perspective, by changing our body sensations, and also changing our actions, including ways to connect socially. And I know that this is a bit of a dense diagram, so I want to take a minute to unpack it with you guys. So I want to start just by understanding how our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions are all interconnected, because that's really the cornerstone of this talk. I think that the vast majority of us are most easily able to identify our thoughts, and particularly the negative thoughts we may have from time to time. And these negative thoughts are often amplified when we are not at our emotional best. So when we're having a bad day, or didn't get enough sleep, or really just sick of dealing with a pandemic, these negative thoughts can be fairly harsh. So I want to give you some examples of how these negative thoughts can be connected to our emotions and ultimately to our actions or our behaviors. So on the left here, we have some examples of negative thoughts, the not so nice and often exaggerated things that a person might think to himself or herself. So in the time of the pandemic, someone might think to themselves, what if I get sick and there's nobody to help me? Or I don't want to become a burden on my son. Or maybe even, no one cares about me. And if we look at the emotions here on the right, we can begin to recognize that these thoughts reflect an underlying emotion or feeling. For example, this statement or this thought of, what if I get sick and there's nobody to help me? Well, it doesn't really align much necessarily with guilt, and it doesn't necessarily align so much with sadness, but there might be a little bit underlying there. But it really does line up nicely with fear. And so you can see how this thought and this emotion are kind of tied together. And this other thought, I don't want to become a burden on my son. It also has a little bit of some sadness underlying, but I think it best aligns with a feeling of guilt. And then this final one of no one caring about me, that lines up best with sadness, right? So you can see here in this slide how each of these negative thoughts, the examples that I'm giving at least, are connected with an underlying emotion. And I think some of us are more connected with our emotions than others. And that's why I wanted to start with these negative thoughts, because I think most of us can identify best with them. So if we take it a step further, I wanted to include possible actions that might result in both these negative thoughts and the associated emotions. So for example, if someone is in fear because they're worried about getting sick, they might just kind of avoid everyone and just become really isolated. That could be a possible consequence of these emotions, this thought and this emotion. If someone feels guilty about potentially becoming a burden on their child, they might avoid talking to him, or maybe talk less with them, or share less of the important topics that we should be talking to them about. And finally, if someone feels really sad, because they think that no one's really caring about them, they might stay in bed all day, or they might decide that they don't want to go and eat dinner, and just really kind of be avoidant. So I really wanted to illustrate how our thoughts and our emotions and actions are all so intertwined, because the best way to combat loneliness is to address all three of these. And so that's what I'm going to be doing in the remainder of the talk. So I'd like to take a look at some strategies to address all three of these categories individually. So we're going to address our thinking, our feeling, and our actions. And I do believe Ms. Thompson or Jackie has provided a handout. If any of you have it and would like to take some notes, feel free. Although this presentation by no means requires you to participate or even have that handout if you don't have it in front of you.
Everyone should have received that handout in their mailboxes last night. So if you didn't pick it up before now, you can certainly grab it from there later on today, so you have it for a reference.
So getting started, I'm going to start by addressing our negative or anxious thoughts. So if a person is having these sort of negative thoughts, the example earlier that I gave was, what if I get sick and there's nobody to help me? What can we do? Well, the first thing I would recommend is encouraging ourselves to try to change our perspective or try to reframe that thought. Because usually these types of thoughts that we have when we're in distress represent sort of the worst case scenario. So if we examine these worst case scenario type thoughts and try to shift our perspective a bit, often we begin to see the flaws in thinking this way. And ultimately, these types of thoughts won't have as much power over us. So how do we shift the perspective or reframe these types of thoughts? Well, here are a couple of strategies. First, we might just kind of ask ourselves, how can I view this situation from a different perspective? With that thought of, what if I get sick and there's nobody to take care of me? You might actually sit and think and realize that there are a number of people in our lives that can offer support. And maybe we can still acknowledge that it would be scary to get sick, but actually there are people in our lives that are there for us and who will care about us. And another strategy, if that doesn't work so easily for you, is to think of somebody that you trust and somebody who tends to be more optimistic, a friend or family member you might ordinarily go to for advice, and ask yourself, how might this person view the situation? If I brought this concern to them, how might they be able to turn it around and help me feel better? Because a lot of times we are our own worst critic, and viewing a situation through someone else's eyes can be really helpful. And a final strategy that I'll suggest here is to examine the evidence. So if you have one of these really negative thoughts, you can be objective by yourself by writing down your thought and then creating two columns on the piece of paper. One, evidence for this thought, and then the second column would be evidence against this thought. And more often than not, we will see that there might not be so much objective evidence to support our negative thoughts. So here's an example. I created my two columns with my thought up here at the top. And then I filled in evidence for and evidence against. So in the evidence for column, maybe we've seen somebody get sick, and that's scary. So that would go in the evidence for column. But look at the evidence against. I have good friends, I have a supportive family and caring staff. I also have trustworthy doctors. So these allow us to realize that we are likely in a much better position than our anxious thought might otherwise want us to believe. So examining the evidence can be really powerful. So let's take a look at a couple other examples of a shifted perspective. So we're still talking about thoughts. And here are two thoughts that I came up with that we might all be feeling right now from time to time, especially with the ongoing social distancing recommendations and as the pandemic continues to, be pretty bad. For example, we might think, gosh, I haven't seen so-and-so in a while. Everyone has forgotten about me. And after we think about it and are able to change our perspective, we might realize that actually my loved ones have not forgotten about me. And I know they would enjoy spending time with me, but we're just not able to do so safely. And then the second example here, I'm so frustrated. I just can't handle another disaster. And then we sit and we think about it. And after reframing the thought or changing the perspective, we might come up with, actually, you know what? I know I've made it through difficult times in the past. And I know that I'm doing my part to stop the spread by social distancing and wearing a mask when I go outside. So again, these thoughts can be overwhelming when we experience them in the moment. But by allowing us to change the perspective, either through our own ability to examine the thought, or perhaps thinking about the advice that an optimistic friend might give us, or even looking at the evidence for and the evidence against, these thoughts can feel less overwhelming, have less influence over our mood, our energy, and our stress level. So now that we've covered thoughts, I want to move on and talk about our feelings or our emotions that can become difficult from time to time. What do we do when we're feeling very scared or sad or guilty? Well, when we're feeling bogged down or overwhelmed by negative emotions or feelings, we can do a few things in the moment to change our focus away from those bad emotions or bad feelings in order for them to have less power over us. An easy example that we can actually do is to change our temperature. This is a way to really interrupt a bad feeling. And an easy way to accomplish this is to warm yourself up, maybe taking a hot shower or bath, or even just drinking a warm beverage. Or, it is summer in Florida, we can also cool ourselves down. And we can do that by just splashing some cold water on our face or even drinking an icy beverage. Another good strategy when we're feeling overwhelmed by a feeling or an emotion is to calm our mind and body by engaging our five senses. And we can do this by listening to calm music, lighting a scented candle that has a calming scent, petting an animal or touching something soft, looking at something beautiful such as art or photographs, or enjoying something to drink that can be relaxing, such as chamomile tea. And a final strategy for when our thoughts and emotions aren't so overwhelming and can be thought of more of a long-term practice rather than a solution in the moment. One of the reasons I like to start with thoughts is because we can recall them easily, right? A lot of times when we're feeling sad or scared or really any kind of negative way, we might try to ignore it or push it away, just kind of get rid of it, even if it's mild. And what this can lead to is that we end up becoming out of touch with our feelings and emotions until they become so overwhelming that we just can't ignore them anymore. But negative emotions, just like positive ones, are normal parts of the human experience. If we can learn to identify our feelings and be willing to sit with them a bit, maybe open up and make room for, say, sadness or fear, then these feelings won't get to the level where they feel overwhelming. So if you're looking through a photo album, for example, and you're feeling a little sad that you aren't as physically connected as you were 6 months ago, just acknowledging it by saying, Oh, okay, I'm feeling a little sad right now. And you know what? That's okay. So in summary, we have 3 strategies here. The first 2 are best applied when we're feeling significant distress around an emotion or feeling, and they work by changing our body's immediate focus. So when we're feeling sad or scared and might not want to do anything, or maybe we're isolating a bit, changing our temperature, engaging the 5 senses may help us feel less controlled by these negative feelings and gives us the control to do what we want. And then this third strategy here, again, it's more of a long-term practice. And if by allowing us to be more in touch with our emotions, sitting with them, making a little bit of room for them in our, in our bodies, when used as a practice, can keep these thoughts from becoming overwhelming. And then I included this here. It's a really great resource that I just learned about last week. It's a free resource that was put out by a group of psychologists out of Canada, I believe. And it has a ton more additional helpful tips for coping with difficult feelings that may arise during this pandemic. It's a self-guided workbook. So anybody who is interested, it's free. I've included the hyperlink here where it can be downloaded, and I've also emailed a copy to Jackie Thompson, who would be able to help you if you're interested in taking a look at it. It's about 35 pages. It's pretty easy to work through, and it helps teach us all skills to use in times of distress during this pandemic. So something to think about as an additional resource. Okay, so we talked about thoughts and we talked about feelings or emotions. So I want to switch gears a little bit and change to talking about our actions and specifically ways to connect with others. So first, it's important to stay connected with people, but in safe ways. My understanding is that you're all allowed to socialize with other residents as long as there's a safe distance maintained. So I would encourage you all to continue doing that because it is so important to feel that we're not alone. But I might also commit to calling a family member or friend or loved one on a regular basis. And there are so many options out there for connecting, regular telephone, Zoom, like we're all doing here that maybe many of us hadn't even heard of 6 months ago. And there are video platforms on Google and Facebook and FaceTime for anybody who has Apple products. In my mind, having the video allows us to feel a little bit more connected because we're able to see the person face to face. But the telephone is not a bad option if one isn't comfortable with the video platforms. Another recommendation from time to time, just pulling out the photo albums to remind ourselves of the good memories when we were more physically connected with our loved ones. And finally, for the Institute of Aging has a 24-hour friendship hotline for anyone who may be feeling disconnected or otherwise struggling. And I've included the number to that on this slide here. So if there's anybody that's feeling particularly alone, just knowing that there are people that are more than happy to listen and have a chat and hear your concerns can be reassuring. Another recommendation is letting others know that you're thinking of them. This will in turn make us feel connected. And we can do that by writing letters or cards or even emails to send to our friends and family. Another great idea to brighten somebody's day is to create a photo album to send to a loved one. And the added benefit is that you're looking through, all of these old pictures, and that will likely brighten your day as well. And then finally, by engaging in activities that allow us to connect with nature, with our higher power or our shared humanity. And maybe we can't attend our religious services as we did in the past, but we can still go out for a walk and get some fresh air. We can still watch birds and other wildlife, or just look at flowers and appreciate the beauty of nature. I would encourage you to find ways to connect spiritually if that's an important part of your practice. And these are just some of the examples that I'm giving. And then I have another extra credit opportunity, getting creative. Actually, there's new evidence that's coming out that shows that engaging in creative activities can also be helpful in combating loneliness. And it doesn't have to be, a Picasso. It can be creative by cooking a meal, or you can just write in a journal, write about your day, write a quick poem or story. Um, for those of us who are more artistically inclined, painting, or really any other artistic project. There's so many options for creativity. And like I said, you really don't have to be an artist. Just the very fact of creating something can be helpful, even just cooking a meal from a recipe. Um, so let's put it all together. We can address the negative thoughts we might have by changing our perspective, by asking ourselves how else we might be able to view a situation, or how that optimistic friend, what advice they might give us, or even doing the evidence for and evidence against, and being objective on our own accord. These can all be very illuminating in sort of identifying the flaws that we may have in our thinking, and especially those negative thoughts. We can address the bad feelings or emotions by changing our body sensations. Hot shower, splash of cold water on our face. We can also do so by engaging our five senses, um, or even that long-term practice of sitting with uncomfortable feelings so that they don't become overwhelming. And then we can modify our behavior by connecting more through phone or video, writing letters, and also engaging in some creative activities from time to time. Oops, sorry. So here's my example, and this is actually the worksheet that I believe Jackie put in your mailboxes. So if you're interested, by all means, jot down a few after we're done, if any of these suggestions have resonance for you. So this is my example, and I have different ways that I can change my perspective. And again, this is dealing with our thoughts, right? So, one example I came up with is by reminding myself that I've been through difficult times before, by knowing that I'm doing my part to contain the virus by social distancing and wearing a mask when I go outside, and by remembering that my family, my friends love me, even if we don't see each other as often, right? And then ways that I can change the way my body feels. This is dealing with our emotions. By lighting a scented candle and listening to music, um, I can engage a couple of my five senses. Or maybe, I'll just allow myself to feel sad from time to time, knowing that it will pass, and practicing being okay with that feeling so the emotions don't have so much power over me, when it gets to that point of being overwhelming. And then lastly, I might take a hot shower when I feel stressed, just to allow myself to kind of calm down and decompress a little bit. And then ways that I can connect. This is kind of talking about our actions or our behaviors. So committing to calling a loved one for a few minutes every day, even if it's just 5 minutes to call brother or sister to say hi, how you doing? It keeps us feeling connected. By writing letters to some old friends. I think maybe the one silver lining I can come up with this pandemic is that I've reconnected with a lot of people that I haven't talked to in a year or two. And these are ways that we can write letters and kind of reconnect with them, and that can be a really nice way of feeling that we're not alone. And then finally, spending time in nature by going for walks has always been sort of something that I do to feel connected to nature, to humanity, to my spiritual power. So I would encourage you all to maybe think about a few different things that you can write down to do in the next few days to keep ourselves feeling connected, because it can really make a huge difference in our experience of this pandemic. And as we've seen, it can actually have some positive implications for both our physical and our mental health. And on that note, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. And I'd be happy to answer some questions if there are any from any of the viewers. I think Jackie's going to assist with that. There she is.
She sure is. Hi. Dr. Walker, thank you so much. This was incredible. To all the residents out there, I don't know about you, but I have been taking copious notes because this was fantastic. And I just love the idea of even trying to reframe my perspective on that negative thinking and how easy it is to get ourselves down. And so what a great piece of advice to just try and reframe how we're thinking. So yes, we would love to do some question and answers if anybody has questions. I've allowed the ability for residents to unmute themselves, but I think if it's okay with everyone, if you can stay on mute and I will unmute you. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I will need for you to be on video. So if, for example, Jed and Sandy, Annie, Tanya, Jerry, Mary, and Marilyn, if you want to start your video, which is by clicking the bottom left corner of your screen where there's a video icon, it should have a red line through it. Click on that. Annie, good job. Jed, Sandy, fantastic. That way I can see you raise your hand and we'll just go one at a time and ask questions. So let's go ahead and get started. If there's any questions, just raise your hand so I can see you. Okay, I see Diane.
Yeah.
Okay, Diane, I just tried to unmute you. Okay, go ahead. Diane, can you?
Sorry.
Go.
Can you hear me
Go
now?
ahead, Diane.
Thank you. Can you make a suggestion to us about what to do when we become aware of a fellow resident who may be in difficulty because of self-isolating or feeling abandoned in this period because we don't have contact with other people?
I think that's a great idea. I think if we can somehow connect with them in a safe way and let them know that you're thinking of them, that you're available to talk, listen to them about whatever might be going on. I suspect that for some people they might not be willing to talk to you right away, and so kind of checking in with them periodically and letting them know that you're there can help to build that trust so that they may feel more comfortable opening up to you in a couple of days or a week or however long it might take. There's also that hotline that I gave you if this is a person that would be amenable to talking to somebody. These are trained professionals who are available 24/7, and that would be something that could be a resource for that person. If there's a concern, a big concern about somebody not eating or not taking care of themselves, I would definitely alert staff, because that might be something where we'd want to intervene. But if it's somebody that's just kind of isolating and a little bit down and struggling, I think just letting them know that you're available for support can mean a lot, and it can go a long way.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, Bruce, I do see you waving there. Dr. Walker, I was just going to say, if we're done with the PowerPoint, maybe if you want to stop.
Oh yeah, sure. If I can figure out how to do that. There we go.
Okay, then we should be able to. I'm going
Can you
to
hear me?
spotlight off there. Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
We had a cluster meeting last week, and one of the things we agreed upon was I have a spreadsheet of everybody's telephone number, and we said two things. With the hurricane season, we need to have everybody's telephone number real quick, and also for loneliness. If you, like, we had a resident that didn't realize that she had to call in by a certain time for a meal. So we said, well, if you have a problem, reach out to your neighbors. Here's everybody's telephone number. So I'm just offering that to the other clusters, that you might want to duplicate a list and share it amongst your group.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you. Jackie, I think you might be muted.
Silly me. Yep, I was. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? We just need to have you raise your hand so I can see you. Mary Jane, is that a question there? Okay, let's get you unmuted. Mary Jane, I don't believe you are sharing your sound, so I can't unmute you.
I think she can unmute from on the bottom left of the screen.
She's not sharing sound.
Oh, okay, okay.
Begin with. So, okay, hold on. Let me go here. All right. Mary's iPhone.
Right.
Hi, is that Mary Jane?
Yes, it's Mary Jane.
Did you have a question? Go ahead.
Okay, the information that you had on that sheet that you were showing us as you went along with your various points, can we have a copy of that?
The worksheet that I provided.
That you showed up, you know, with the different points as you were going along, that sheet.
Yes, that is, so I have a copy of the sheet that Jackie distributed has the My Connections plan, which was the list that I showed you at the very end. And at the bottom of that is the diagram of the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
It's in your mailbox, Mary Jane, which is quite full, by the way.
Okay, I haven't
You have a
seen
birthday cookie in there too, so go and get that.
it. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, happy belated birthday.
Super.
Thank you. It was an excellent presentation. I really
Thank you very
enjoyed
much.
it.
Thank you.
Out of it.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? No? If you like, I can unmute everybody for just a moment here. You all have the opportunity to unmute yourselves. Is there any conversation amongst yourselves you'd like to have? It looks like we're finished with all of our questions. Although again, there's a few people whose screens we can't see. Tanya, Jerry, iPad 80. If you don't mind sharing, who are you?
Amy, it's Sandra St. Martin.
Oh, Sandra St. Martin. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Sandra. So I can't see you. Did you have a question?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, just
You
wanted to
here
check.
with Marilyn Meyer? Hello?
I can see you, Marilyn. Oh, we can hear you, Marilyn. I don't see you. Do you have a
I'm lucky I got this far.
good job?
I'm not
You did a good
fiddling
job.
too much. I don't want to lose you. But yeah, I unmuted myself. Yeah, we're here. And Sister
Wonderful.
Carol here watching. And
Hi,
Mary
Carol.
Jane. I saw you, Mary Jane.
Great. Does anyone
Anyway,
have any questions?
You have any questions? No. No. Just keep doing what we're doing and trying to keep staying up and happy and gardening and cooking and whatever. Walking is a big release here that you can walk around the whole property with all the beauty.
It is a gorgeous property to walk around. So we're very, very lucky to have that ability to walk out in nature.
Right. You can't see me though, right?
Can't see you. If you go to the bottom left of your screen, Marilyn, there's
Yeah.
a little picture of a video camera with a red line through it. Click on that.
Not left. I'm looking left. Left.
Bottom left corner.
I have the icons for the
That's okay. Don't worry.
email and I know. I'm lucky I got this far. I'm very proud. I'm very
You're
proud.
okay.
I wish I could find what you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Jed or Sandy?
I need an instructor to help.
You
No?
might mention too,
Sandy.
Sandy, go ahead.
you might mention too that we still have the capability of going over and using the fitness facility for exercise classes and using the equipment themselves, and that's very therapeutic.
It definitely is, yes. Taking care of yourself physically can make a huge difference in how we feel emotionally. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Jed.
So I'm not trying to be negative, but actually in a former lifetime, I used to do kind of a risk management. So I would look at the worst case scenarios. So let's suppose we're in our apartments, we got COVID outside, and, you know, a hurricane comes through, the power's out. I know we have to prepare for that, but, you know, any ideas psychologically how to handle that? Maybe be prepared.
I think knowing that you're prepared, having a plan in place can make us feel better. I would suggest, you know, I think if we have a plan in place, that's really all we need to do. I think if we think about, you know, the worst case scenario, I know that might have been what you did for work, but if we're focused on worst case scenario, I think it can really elevate our anxiety. It can elevate a lot of those negative feelings. So, you know, if I was filling this out in one of those little sheets that I had, I would, you know, I might say, oh gosh, it's hurricane season. But then the reality, you know, examining the facts, you know, while I have this, you know, in place for preparation, you know, I really trust the staff where I live, and, you know, whatever else you might come up with. But I think it's important not to sort of fixate on what might happen, right? But just knowing that you're ready for it if it does.
Right. And we are. There's no safer place than JKV. That's where I'm going after the story.
Yes, yes, I couldn't agree more.
All righty. If no one else has any other questions, then I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for the afternoon.
All right.
Can't thank all of you enough for coming out today and spending your time with us, being able to enjoy the benefits of everything Dr. Walker had to share with us. We're just thrilled to have you here. Just to let you know that both of those resources that Dr. Walker shared, the website from those very nice Canadians, love those Canadians, as well as the 1-800 number for the friendship line, I will send out an email to everyone who's on the call today with that information, so you'll have it directly, and that way you're able to tap into those resources.
Good.
And please
Yeah.
share them with other people if you think that they could be helpful.